The Philadelphia Eagles are Super Bowl champions. We're going to give you our reaction and talk about how this team was built and what lessons the league can learn from it today on the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast.
You are Locked On NFL Scouting with the Draft Dudes, your daily podcast for NFL and college football scouting. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's better than this? It's guys being dudes here on the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast. We're the Draft Dudes. I'm Joe Marino from Locked On Bills. He's Kyle Crabbs from Locked On Dolphins. And we are your NFL experts here with you daily to talk team building across the league on the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast with the Draft Dudes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Want to issue a big thank you, shout out, and welcome to our everydayers. Those of you who never miss a single episode, we appreciate y'all being here very, very much. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet.
Joe, happy Victory Monday to the final team to celebrate a Victory Monday, the Philadelphia Eagles. Won Super Bowl 59 in the biggest beatdown since Seattle over Denver, right? I think this was the biggest Super Bowl lead that we had seen since that game when it was 35-0.
Yeah.
Philly only got it to 34-0. Shame on them. But
so 40-6 at one point.
Yeah, just won in the most resounding fashion. Very impressive performance from Philadelphia, very uncharacteristic performance from Kansas City. But we'll talk about the game, and then we'll talk about the Birds and their roster, and then what the league what lessons Philadelphia can impress upon the rest of the league here for the next couple of years with a championship formula.
It's a sobering reminder of only one team ends their season happy. That's it, right? It's the Eagles.
Well, with the ultimate happiness, right?
Well,
there are teams that did not have expectations that I'm sure their fans were plenty happy with what they got, but the ultimate fulfillment of a championship. Yeah, this is what a way to go out too.
Defensive line, man. It's pass rush, dude. They crushed with the 4-man rush. That's the story of the game. They got a pressure rate of 38%. They never blitzed. Sacked Mahomes 6 times. The dude had no comfort in the pocket because the Eagles were everywhere with those 4 guys. Not only were they able to contain and cage him in, they freaking got him down, dude. I mean, you want to talk about just 4 dudes selling out, rushing the passer, exposing, the tackle situation quite a bit. And they wreaked havoc, dude. The Chiefs could find zero offensive rhythm. And even when Hurts threw the pick, you're like, Kansas City's not moving the ball. This isn't going to matter. They're going to get the ball right back with decent field position. Just never for 1 second did you feel like Kansas City was going to be able to move the football, and then it never really happened. They got some garbage stats there at the end of the game, but by all accounts, this is like a 40-6 win for Philadelphia.
And it with the first 20 minutes of the game, arguably should have been a lot worse than that. When you consider it was still 7 or 10-0, and you're like, man, Philly left 2 possessions out here on the field where they didn't get points.
Yeah. And normally that matters against Kansas City. You're like, oh boy, you got to take advantage.
Play with your food, and then it turns around and bites you in the end. I found myself at one point, I said out loud, this feels like the Tampa Bay game when they played in Tampa and they just couldn't block them up front. And it was like the same vibes. And Pat trying to do anything and everything he could to navigate a pocket that didn't exist and didn't really have a good feel for where the exit lanes out of the pocket were. You could tell when he moved off his spot,
they were there.
He didn't really have a feel of where they were and where they weren't because he kept running and fading into the pressure. Now, some of that's Philadelphia occupying a lot of space around the quarterback and just compressing the pocket in which the way that they did. But Joe, Bryce Huff was a healthy scratch for this game.
Yeah. Yeah, dude. What are we doing, right? It's insane.
It's disgusting that, and Philly has a couple of guys off this group that are expiring contracts that I don't know based off how Philly has kind of constructed their roster with cap depth and Are they going to afford to sign Josh Sweat to a new contract? Milton Williams certainly looked the part. I popped on some of the tape there in the fourth quarter for him, was watching his pressures throughout the season, because I'm like, I'm certainly not going to sit here and watch the end of this game with my undivided attention. So I'm looking at guys like that, and they're complementary pieces of this front that I think you could see go somewhere else and get a really nice contract. And I don't know that Philly will bring him back, but that's you mentioned the pass rush, and that's the moral of the story for Philadelphia.
I'm glad you mentioned feeling like you're watching the Tampa game where the tackles were the problem again. And I'm sure from Kansas City side of things, they're thinking to themselves, boy, how are we back in this same spot, not having the tackles for Mahomes? And they had some miscalculations along the way. They gave the big money to Taylor, kind of stuck with that deal. They hit on Suamaitia at least as a rookie. There's a lot of
Wanya Morris were the consecutive day 2 draft picks at offensive tackle.
And hat tip to Joe Thuney for going out there and playing tackle. I watched the tape on Thuney. I felt like he was shaky all the way along. And that's why I said what I did, I think at some point last week, where it's like, I'm not sure this is the best plan. Like, you really depleted that middle 3 and you're still bad on the edge. Well, just be bad on the edge.
Right. And then try to give help in whatever way you can, because that Kansas City's had that formula of playing health. It was almost a detriment that all the wide receivers were healthy. Right. It's like, all right, we play some more 11 personnel, and it really felt like the 13 personnel was the thing big. That Kansas City did really well in the postseason that put you in a bind. They didn't even try to run the ball.
You know, Kyle, it's also from Kansas City side of things, it kind of feels like this is what this offense has been all year. They haven't been very good.
Maybe not to this degree, but you're not wrong.
Well, and I mean, this is like an elevated thing, because I do believe that in your elimination game that you find out like what your real weaknesses are. I think a lot of that was exposed in this game. And I think I'll slander my own team, the Bills. That was the game where you're like, oh yeah, there it is. They're waking up. But then in reality, that was just, they know the Bills and the Bills stink playing defense against them. This is, even against Houston, dude, they had 212 yards.
Yeah.
They're 15th scoring offense. Like, this was really just who they were offensively. And in that moment against that defense, against that coordinator with that pass rush, everything was exposed. And we hadn't even talked about Jalen Hurts, Saquon Barkley, A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith,
Right. Well, and a lot of that, I think there's some good storylines there for how this team was constructed.
Yeah.
Right? Because a lot of different ways of talent acquisition that came into play on the offensive side of the ball. A little bit everything. Yeah. Right? But I felt like they really handled, like, Jalen had super clean pockets.
Yeah.
All day. And when I think it was very helpful for Philadelphia that a couple of the early opportunities when they caught pressure and they had the one-on-ones down the field, they hit a couple of them.
Yeah.
Even the one that was called the OPI.
Right.
Right. And then you punt. The fact that that's now buried in your head, if you're Kansas City, to know, okay, Jalen's in rhythm with that today. And it ultimately caught up with the back-breaking shot when it was 27-0. And I think they turned it over on downs, and then they took the shot play for the touchdown to Devonta Smith.
Dime.
And you could tell very early on, based on how Hurts delivered a couple of those opportunities, where I know I'm catching pressure. I know I have a one-on-one down the sideline. I'm going to take the shot. And I think it really set the tone for Philadelphia to kind of put Kansas City in the bind defensively. And then when they didn't pressure, they could get no pressure because that offensive line just played outstanding in pass protection against Kansas City.
Yeah. And I can sit here and talk KC issues because they had corner issues all year with Nas Johnson and Jalen Watson, Oppo, Trent McDuffie. They couldn't cover tight ends and slots all year. They didn't have a left tackle. Like they had issues this season, and they were able to navigate them to this point. But this was like the team that was perfectly positioned to exploit those weaknesses. And I mean, all the hat tips in the world to Philadelphia. Okay, we're going to get into how this team was built. And as a tease, all of the above. We'll break it down here on the other side of it, folks. Be sure to stick with us. As a small business owner, your work doesn't end when the clock hits 5. Your business is always on your mind, which means when it's time to hire, you need to check out a partner that works just as hard as you do. That's where LinkedIn Jobs comes in. When you clock out, LinkedIn clocks in. LinkedIn makes it easy to post your job for free, share it with your network, and get qualified candidates all in one place. You post your job, and actually LinkedIn has this great new feature that helps you write job descriptions, and then you can quickly get your job in front of the right people with deep candidate insights. And here's a pro tip. Add the hashtag hiring frame to your profile picture to double your reach to get those qualified candidates. No wonder 72% of small businesses say that LinkedIn helps them find high-quality hires. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply.
So time for flowers for Howie Roseman.
Boy.
Right. And so sometimes drafting is just as easy as who does the consensus board say is the best overall player? Pick that guy. And if he happens to go to the University of Georgia, then you're going to get twice as many flowers. And that was the joke there for what it felt like about 2 years with Howie, was just, he's just going to pick the best available Georgia Bulldog and he's going to get heap praise for it. But I think for Philadelphia, it was how they got to the point of having some excess draft capital that I think tells a lot of the story. There was the trade down from 6 to 12 with Miami, and that big day in March where Miami was at 3, and then they moved down to 12 with San Francisco with the Trey Lance deal, and it came back up to 6. And then they ended up trading up one spot, I believe it was, for Devonta Smith on draft day. But they got an extra first-round pick that turned into Jordan Davis, for example. And then the Saints deal for them turned out to be just a total coup, where they took 18, 101, a future 1, and a future 2, and gave up and got back 16 and 19 in the same draft class. And that turned into in part Jalen Carter, the second round pick that turned into Cooper DeJean. Or did I have that backwards?
Well, they
Philly gave 16 and 19.
I don't have it in front of me.
The Saints
trade. Yeah. They stockpiled future assets.
They went down from 16 to 18 because they had picked 16 and 19. And then they got a future 1 that ended up being a top 10 pick, and that was Jalen Carter. And then a 2024 2 that ended up being Cooper DeJean.
Man, you mentioned BPA. I can tell you without a shadow of a doubt that the last 4 top 40 picks that they made, Jalen Carter, Nolan Smith, Quinyon Mitchell, and Cooper DeJean, was emphatically the number 1 player on my board.
Yeah.
Those were such easy choices. And just fall in line perfectly with premium positions and positions of needs. That's impressive. But I mean, go back to me, it's the 2020, 2021 drafts. I think there's a lot to say. Mitchell, DeJean, Jalen Hunt was a net positive, Carter, Nolan Smith, all these players. But in 2021 and 2020, they had foundational drafts to be able to get a Jalen Hurts in the second round, to be able to get a Landon Dickerson in the second round, Milton Williams in the third round, Devonta Smith in the first round, and didn't panic there, right? That probably didn't shake out exactly how they expected, but they still able to get their guy. These are franchise-altering selections, not to mention how you complement that with trading for A.J. Brown and the Chauncey Gardner-Johnson acquisition. It's just hit after hit, and not just hit, not doubles. These are home runs. Stacking them, dude. Stacking them. He went Mark McGuire in the mid-2000s. You know what I mean?
You can go to 18. They had 1 pick in the top 125, and they got Dallas Goedert, Avonte Maddox, Josh Sweat, and Jordan Mailata.
Dude, yeah, what are you doing with that? That's insane. That's absolutely insane. The best left tackle in the game, a big-time impact pass rusher, and one of the top 8-10 tight ends of the last 5 years.
Yeah. And that was with 49, 125, 130, 206, and 233 were the.
It's not where you pick, it's who you pick.
That's right. And making sure it's the right players for your organization. And I think that's the Nick Sirianni lesson that I think I'm carrying out of this too, is Nick Sirianni's the right personality for that team with those players and that market, the fan base, the media. there's a wavelength that exists in Philadelphia that, like, I've lived in the greater Philadelphia market for almost my entire life. And there's been nice guy coaches, there's been tough guy coaches, there's been Andy Reid, but even Andy, like, and they had a lot of success. They didn't have the breakthrough, but they got tired of Andy's stuff real quick.
Yeah.
And Andy, bless him, goes to the Midwest, Kansas City.
Perfect.
A little bit of a different vibe.
Yeah.
And like, people roll their eyes at some of that kind of stuff. And I get why, but for the real life application of trying to do what Philadelphia just did, you're not in a talent acquisition business. You're in a team building business.
Yeah.
And that, I think it's very taken for granted. And I think that's something for Philadelphia when you look at from the top down, the kind of people and how they all operate. It's a valuable lesson I think they carry.
God, so I think it's a home run point, man. And Nick Sirianni is one of the more unique personalities in the league, right? With his involvement with his family and his kids at press conferences, yelling at fans, right? He's an offensive-minded head coach. It's not an offensive play caller. That's really weird. But his personality is just, like you said, exactly what's right for that organization, that city, and all of that comes together to have the success that they've now had. Like, this is 2 Super Bowl appearances in 3 years.
Yeah, 4 years.
So, it's a pretty short period of time, and they got to win. And they're probably feeling pretty good about their ability to kind of stay there. Now they got some stuff to figure out with a bunch of these players expiring, and we've got to replace Kellen Moore, but it all works. It all works, and that's why they're in this position. I also really have enjoyed some of the redemption stories that they've hit along the way, like a guy like Mekhi Becton.
Yeah.
Laughed out of town in New York as a tackle. He goes to Philly. Obviously, Coach Southland is as good as it gets in terms of offensive line coach, but plays right guards. Positive asset to that football team. And I think that's a big part of this story as well, as a guy like that being able to come in and be the best version of himself and be a net positive as a starter of that football team.
Zach Bowen.
Oh, man.
Remember Zach Bowen coming out
in
college? And like, this guy can play. There's no doubt this guy can play. And he goes to New Orleans, and they never really figure out how to use him. And he lands in Philadelphia, and with Vic and the football IQ element of it, and the versatility that they found a way to unlock that he really couldn't have in any of his opportunities beforehand. Great story for a guy who signed on a 1-year deal and is now in position as, the age 29 season, gonna have a chance to cash in big time, potentially.
And I don't want to overstate Jahan Dotson, but I mean, they gave a bag of balls for the guy, and he caught a big time catch that set up that first score. He was just like, that guy came in and had a net positive. They also had really good succession plans in. Like, this team has also said goodbye to big time players like Jason Kelce at center, like a Fletcher Cox at defensive tackle. Well, hello, Cam Jurgens and Jalen Carter. Like, they just kind of got ahead of that stuff, and they've been forward thinking with a lot of those selections that position them to do this. They the James Bradbury, it didn't really work out. Well, we can quickly get that taken care of with a Quinyon Mitchell. So just, man, the right succession plans on top of redemption stories, on top of trade hits, on top of draft hits.
Which I think you can put Jalen Hurts in succession plans. Right?
Dude, perfect, yeah.
And that only happens if you have an executive that has built the trust to see multiple life cycles through.
Yeah.
And I think that's the really impressive thing with Howie, is that, Howie took over the job as the GM in 2010. Do you know when Howie Roseman first won a playoff game as an executive? Took over in 2010. This is the first time that Philadelphia won a playoff game. Yeah. They were 0-2 in 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. 7 years. No playoff wins in 7 years. And in that stretch of time, there was head coach hirings and firings. There were missed draft picks that were had, right? There was a big move for a quarterback that happened in that stretch. There was Sam Bradford got traded in this stretch, and
a lot.
And then they finally have a breakthrough.
Yeah,
and then they go from 13-3, they go 9-7, 9-7, 4-11-1, and they trust Howie to see the next variation of the team through, and they rebound and they go 9-8, 14-3, lose the Super Bowl, 11-6, 14-3, win the Super Bowl. So it's hard to argue for continuity just for the sake of continuity. But I do think like the Howie Roseman lesson here of like, sometimes it's okay to let a guy work through his own maturation and learn from mistakes and correct mistakes without just firing a guy because there was regression on the team.
Yeah. All right. We have a lot more to get to. We've already kind of started to talk about some of the league lessons that can be learned from the Eagles, but we'll expand on a lot of that here on the other side of it. Folks, be sure to stick with us. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening tip-off or want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. I love using FanDuel's live betting feature because it keeps every moment of the game exciting. Whether I'm backing my team for a late-game rally or picking a player to hit a clutch three, I never feel like I missed my chance. Plus, the app is easy to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com to get your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA.
Yeah, sorry, I kind of jumped the gun on there in the Howie Roseman lesson. Don't fire your guys too fast.
Well, I mean, in a lot of ways, the entire team building story gives you ideas for learning, lessons that can be learned. But I would like to just put this out there because I think this is a big piece of this conversation. Do you know where Philly in 2024 ranked in terms of dead cap?
It's funny. I in anticipation of potentially doing like some upheaval with my own football team this offseason, I did like some dead cap research. They were in the top 10, were they not? I think they were pretty high up on this list, but was it over $50 million in dead cap?
Over 60. That's
60?
It's $63.6 million in dead cap, 8th highest in the NFL.
Half of the teams in the top 10 made the playoffs in dead cap.
It's kind of weird, right? Because I feel like we've had some really good opportunities to talk to different people. And I feel like a lot of the themes and different people that we've talked to, they say, you know what, it's about, contracts, you got to hit on it, but they really focus on dead cap. You can't just have a lot of dead cap. And it's like, that sounds good in theory, but you're seeing teams more than ever willing to accumulate it, and it's not slowing them down.
Right. Well, so there's an element of this that when you run the team the way that Philly does, and they're in the same general bucket of being very liberal with future cap debt, like Cleveland is. Those are the two teams that are kind of at the forefront of void contracts. And when you have the stability within the organization to have a guy who's running the books and all the talent allocation and can have succession plans in place and has a guy on a rookie contract that's going to step in favor of a guy who's not on the team but still accounts for $18 million in cap space, it's just the hard part is reaching that sustained same vision for an extended period of time to allow something like this to happen. But I mean, what other teams were high up on that list? Where Buffalo was high up on that list. Yeah. I mean, the Stephon Diggs himself was what, 28,
over 30,
32. Yeah, so, and they're another organization that has had quarterback, head coach, and executive that have been in place since they drafted Josh in 18, but Bean and McDermott have been there since 17.
Yeah.
Right. So, I don't think it's a coincidence that the teams that were able to circumvent that and had success were they were in one of two buckets. They were teams that have had well-tenured, well-established team building ideology for an extended period of time, that have players in the pipeline ready to step in, or they were players or teams that flushed a bunch of expensive talent and had new programs with new coaches that were just impressing new things and provided a jolt to the organization and a brand new identity that everybody was bought into. And like, those were the two buckets of teams that had dead cap that still managed to be competitive football teams this year.
Yeah, Denver at 1, Buffalo 3, Minnesota at 5, Green Bay 7, Philly 8, Tampa 9. Your 3 teams with the least amount of dead cap: Bengals, Falcons, Colts.
Just the place you want to be, right? They're spending they're spending on players on the roster.
And but they all finished 8-9 or 9-8.
That gets into the semantics of cash versus cap and cap over cap. And I think somebody just had Eric DeCosta on for another interview that I need to watch. But DeCosta did the show with Adam Breneman and talked about how the ratio of cash over cap that they aspire to spend every year. And that is not reflective of all of dead cap allocations, right? That's creating future cap allocations that become dead money when you move on for players.
I want to put something on a platter for you, because I just really want to hear how you answer this.
I can't wait to mess this up. Okay.
Well, no, this is, and selfishly, I know I'm going to get this question, so I'm going to get you, pick your brain right now. What do you say to this, right? Like, Philadelphia, loaded roster. We're paying 2 receivers. We're playing 3 offensive linemen big money. We're paying a tight end, a quarterback, a running back. We're paying not as much on the defense, right? Like, you do have Sweat, who is an expensive player. You got a couple of dollar guys in the back 7, but like, for the most part, like, you got a lot of expensive elements on this roster where maybe some people would look at this and say, how do you make that all work? Like, how do they have the 8th most, $64 million in dead cap, pay all the things that we just said? Is there something to being like, load up on your veterans on offense and draft your defense? Like, how do you reconcile that?
Well, that Tom McShay did this on the McShay show not that long ago and talked about the trends of annual competitive teams. And he did the spotlight on, like, there's an offensive lineman in there. There's a quarterback that gets drafted. But by and large, like, a lot of these teams invest a ton of their early draft capital into trying to create an elite defense. And, Philadelphia, with the drafting of Jalen Hurts in the 2nd round and the free agent signing of Saquon Barkley and the trade for A.J. Brown, like, they allocated a lot of talent in a lot of different ways. But when you look at Nolan Smith, Jalen Carter, Quinyon Mitchell, Jordan Davis,
Cooper
DeJean is not a 1st-round pick, but a top 50 pick, right? There is a year-over-year example in case of, it's not just like, oh, there's no such thing as having too many good corners and defensive linemen, but really, it's using that side of the ball to try to create an elite unit. And I think it makes sense where the defensive side of the ball is the reactionary side of the ball, right? You have to have quick twitch and hand-eye coordination and fast processing skills and fast transitional skills, many times moving backwards in the back 7. That just, I think, necessitates young dynamic athletes to be able to have the kind of success you need to play elite defense. Whereas on the offensive side of the ball, I think there is more value in continuity and everybody being on the same page and understanding what the responsibility is and where everybody's supposed to be. And that comes with time on task and more stability and maturation. And so I think that's probably something that can be explored a lot further. But I thought it was really interesting that Tom McShay did that exact show or segment on one of his shows talking about Baltimore and Buffalo and Pittsburgh and Philadelphia and Kansas City, and you look at like their draft trends and how they use their early draft capital, and the vast majority of it early is sunk into the defensive side of the ball or the offensive once they have a quarterback. And that's how Philly is where Philly is.
And it's a big lesson to be learned.
Right. Because but then also Philly, like the way that they structure some of the contracts too, like the Jalen Hurts contract extension, right? And when they signed that deal, it was really unique at the time, but he has minimum base salary automatically. And it came in, and once Philly said, this is our guy, we're not going to get cute with leaving base salary that we then have to restructure and reorganize. And instead, the entire life of his contract is minimum base salary with a player option bonus that gets prorated out for 5 years. And then when that contract happens like that, you can get into the tradability of that contract and the exit opportunities that exist within that contract. And if you pay out the option bonus, maybe you eat the dead cap and it accelerates, but there's an exit strategy for the quarterback where, you know, a team that acquires him could potentially get just the minimum salary, but coming into every year, you've maximized your salary cap space with a super quarterback contract. Like, what is Jalen Hurts' salary cap hit this year? Now I've opened Pandora's box and I need to find it out, but
I should have it right in front of me here. I've been on these pages.
It's less than $22 million. He's in year 3 of the contract.
Yeah.
And then next year in year 4 in 2026, it's below 32. And year 5, it's below 42 and a half. And then, you know, the cost of that is you get to, when the contract voids and there's $38 million in deferred money that would potentially, when you add it all up, it's a supersized quarterback contract for 1 year. But you think they're worried about that in 2029 right now?
None of it matters. They've already won. Yeah.
And you can extend the player.
It's literally the dead cap conversation that we just had. Who cares, right? Right.
So I think they have found the right ways to approach long-term strategy with salary cap, in addition with how they've structured this contract, with paying a competitive contract. And they were fast to get an extension done with Jalen Hurts, which I think is once you know your guys, like Landon Dickerson got paid early and upfront and handsomely, and it's going to age gracefully here when Trey Smith hits free agency and signs somewhere for probably $24 million, which I would much rather have Landon Dickerson for 22.
Right.
And you could do that up and down the roster with players that are on rookie contracts that they give out these contracts early to with conviction because they're stability and they understand and the player's a good fit for the organization and blah, 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 all the way down the line. So there you go. That's going to do it for us here today. Locked on NFL Scouting. I'm Kyle Crabbs. He's Joe Marino. We appreciate you guys as always for checking out the show. Congratulations to the Philadelphia Eagles for their win in Super Bowl 59. That is going to do it for us here today on the show. We'll be back again tomorrow. We hope to see you then.